How are you? My name is Dean Bragonnier, and I'm the founder and executive dyslexic of a nonprofit organization called NoticeAbility, which, when you say it out loud, is actually meant to be understood in one of two ways. I am incredibly pleased to be able to speak now to you under the auspices of Learning Ally. I, as a dyslexic in high school, benefited from what was then Recording for the Blind and now is Learning Ally. And I just had an incredible experience understanding that there were organizations out there that understood that my particular learning difference made text sort of a prohibitive form of communication for me, and helped me circumvent that by allowing me to absorb my teachings through spoken word as opposed to written text, which was incredibly advantageous. I have evolved as a dyslexic. In my early years, I had a mother who was very encouraging of the fact that despite having difficulty reading, I had a wonderful creative mind, and that eventually further down the road I would start to see evidence of that. That reading, however, was going to be a challenge, and I had to get through it, which I did, but not without what marks so many dyslexics' experience. You know, ridicule and hazing, and and just a lot of self-doubt. I wasn't entirely sure whether my mother was telling me the truth. For most of my elementary school years, I was pretty beat up, and I eventually got some of the extra help that I needed to start leveling that playing field in school, and actually worked incredibly hard and plowed through it as many dyslexics do, and was accepted to a college called Bates College up in Lewiston, Maine, and I had the benefit of being in an environment where my learning differences were appreciated as opposed to ridiculed. And at Bates, I was able to grasp an understanding of what made my mind not only different but unique and quite compelling. I was attracted to entrepreneurship, as many dyslexics are, and had a wonderful, albeit stressful, experience as a restaurant owner in my early 20s, and realized during that time of my life that some of the skills that I had cultivated as a dyslexic, the ability to think of creative solution to problems that others could not, my ability to identify and sort of read the emotions of customers or staff, was incredibly advantageous. And I was successful in unloading that restaurant, and sort of had my MBA, if you would, and went on to start managing nonprofits. Now, most recently, about 3 years ago, I was given a book, right? That's a backhanded compliment, right, for a dyslexic. Here, read a book. But it was called The Dyslexic Advantage, and it is one of the most compelling pieces of literature I've ever read. It is written by a pair of neuropsychologists out of Seattle, Washington, and what they've done is they've actually deconstructed the dyslexic mind, how it's physically constructed, juxtapose that against the normal mind. It's quite fascinating. Deals with many columns embedded in the cortex and axon lengths. It's all really fascinating. But then goes on to show how that unique construction, that brain construction, translates to a set of cognitive skills that make us outliers in the opposite end of the spectrum, meaning we're exceptional at these things. And then what the Dyslexic Advantage does is it takes it one step further, and it actually demonstrates what vocational paths dyslexics pursue where they find the most disproportionate amount of success, and that's entrepreneurship, engineering, architecture, and the arts. And a little light bulb went off in my head, and I said, okay, I understand in the education world they say that the panacea for dyslexic minds is executive functioning, right? Because we're macro thinkers, we need to be able to distill that macro thinking into finite, methodical steps so that we can achieve our goals. And social emotional education, right? Understanding what how we think, metacognition, how we can implement some of the our skills and our emotional disposition in order to achieve outcomes that we desire. And I thought what we need to do is we need to blend these two things together. We need to introduce to dyslexic students at middle school, right after they've finished their remedial reading training, which is absolutely mandatory in my opinion for all dyslexics. We need to know how to learn, we need to be able to read fluently enough that we can get through life. However, we wind up emerging from that experience pretty beaten up. And so what we need to do is expose these dyslexics to some positive reinforcement by introducing them to those skills, aka those pre-vocational paths, where they are naturally inclined to succeed. And we'll embed within that the social emotional learning and the executive functioning methodology so that those students can get the skills that they need to succeed in school. So what I've started is an organization called NoticeAbility, right? If you notice our ability, you see no disability, NoticeAbility. And the idea is to bring those professions to a middle school level, take out the finer aspects that don't really have relevance to a middle school age, double line depreciation and nonsense like that. But instead to deliver that to middle school students through an e-learning environment, which allows me to convey my lesson plans through audio, video, graphic or pictorial aids, so that the barrier to entry, which is text, is completely removed. And then with these online curricula, there is a blended delivery, which means that students on an IEP in a public education setting or in a nonprofit youth-serving organization are able to have these team-building, project-oriented exercises where the entrepreneurship class creates a prototype for an invention, right, and builds that out and builds a lesson plan, and the kids start to identify not only what makes them incredibly sort of predisposed to success as entrepreneurs, but also to be able to see that based on intrinsic evidence as opposed to externalized evidence where somebody's saying, no, you're really going to be good as an entrepreneur. Well, that doesn't amount to as much, in my opinion, as that young dyslexic sort of flipping that switch and having that light bulb go on internally. Anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. But the point is that I am building this curricula, and there will be 4 of them based on those vocational paths: entrepreneurship, engineering, architecture, and the arts. And I'm building them in conjunction with Harvard University, their School of Education, as well as their business school, Tufts University in Massachusetts, and the Carroll School, also in Massachusetts, which is a K-8 dyslexic-specific school. So every nonprofit, needs to raise some capital to build what they want to build and also build a community. So I thought, how do I accomplish both these goals simultaneously? So I have a lot of family, and my wife who is also dyslexic, and our son who's also dyslexic, like to spend time with our family on Martha's Vineyard. And it occurred to me, I love to swim. I swam in college. I don't know of anybody who's officially swum around Martha's Vineyard Island. So why don't I, right? It's a good way for you to notice my ability, right? And I also think that this somewhat ridiculous feat I'm about to attempt is kind of a metaphor for what it's like to be a dyslexic in school, right? We've got this incredible challenge. In this case, it's a 50-mile swim over 27 different legs. In school, we have all of these changing elements, right? teachers, different teaching styles, different classrooms, peer groups. Well, in this case, it's tides and currents and weather and jellyfish and hopefully not sharks. And the way that we persevere in school, aka the way I'm going to persevere in this swim, is to use my creative problem solving, read the situation, think of solutions to problems as they arise. And when I can't figure out a solution, I can reach out and embrace those who may have something to contribute. And so I feel it's sort of a metaphor, but it's also an interesting way for me to raise funds, but also to extend knowledge of NoticeAbility to a community online. And I'm going to do that specifically by creating 27 video blogs in conjunction with each one of these swims. So that means I've got a young videographer who's going to follow me around, and what we're going to do is have sort of a Q&A with a notable dyslexic, somebody who has succeeded as a result of their dyslexia, not despite their dyslexia. So that will be everybody from the Martha's Vineyard high school student on the swim team who's just graduated and is headed to college, to famous musicians like Carly Simon, who's dyslexic. So my hope is that I haven't rambled on too much, but my hope is that I have intrigued you to perhaps follow this journey as it unfolds. It starts on July 11th, and I do 3 days of swimming, 1 day of rest for 27 legs, which expands over 38 days, and I'm scheduled to finish on August 16th. But what I want to do is be able to present to those who are interested in following this my philosophy on dyslexia, which is, yep, reading's tough. Bummer. Happens to us first time we get into school, bad timing. But on the other side of that are some inherent superpowers that our minds contain, that when properly embraced and empowered lead us to achieve the greatness of, Charles Schwab to Richard Branson to Albert Einstein to John Lennon to Pablo Picasso to Tom Cruise to, the list goes on and on. So I hope you'll join me in this. I hope that you will watch some of these videos. If you have the resources to contribute, please do. I can't build this without money. It's a reality. But if you don't have those resources, please repost, retweet, like, whatever else you can do on social media to help me build this community as I do this. So, in the meantime, you can visit www.notice, for all you dyslexics, NOTICE, ability, ABILITY.org. You can see us on Facebook at NoticeAbility USA, Twitter on NoticeAbility LD, and Instagram at NoticeAbility. Okay, thanks for sharing your time with me. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.